All right, so today's project, I have a 2005 Dodge Dakota with the 3.7 V6 in it. And the customer's complaint was it was smoking. Had some bluish tinted smoke coming out of the tailpipe. So we did a couple of things. We checked the PCV system, it seemed good. We checked the base engine compression. That's why we have all the coils and spark plugs out. Had good compression. We did a leak down test on each cylinder. Good leak down. There was no leak down, acceptable amount anyway. So I really don't have any suspicion of rings on this one. I think what we've got is a valve stem steel issue. One thing I noted during the test drive was the smoke increased as we decelerated or when we sat at an idle, but when we accelerated, after an initial little puff, it would go away. So that indicates to me that when it's a closed throttle is when we get the most amount of oil entering into the combustion chamber. That means it's probably vacuum pulling it in, and that would be pulling it through the valve stem seals. So anyway, that's my theory, and what we're going to do today is I'm not going to show you each and every bolt that I take out. I am just going to do along the way type things. Like first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to have to take these heater pipes off so that I can get the valve covers out. So I'm going to figure out a way to get those without losing much of the coolant. We don't want to waste stuff. Go ahead and we'll take that out of the way, and we'll try to get the first of two rocker covers off. And I'm going to stop now, and we'll, as I progress, if I run across something difficult, I'll back up and show you an actual nut and bolt removal. But I'm not going to, bore you to death with me taking every single bolt out on this video. Okay? Thanks. So like I said, I wanted to go ahead and remove these heater pipes, and I don't want to drain all the coolant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, right on the two rubber hoses that won't be in the way, I'm going to clamp them off. I didn't have a pair of pinch off pliers, so I'll just take a pair of ice grips and put something to protect the hose from the rubber, from the sharp teeth, and I can use them as pinch off pliers. So I'm going to do that for both of those heater hoses. Then I can take that whole assembly off all the way to the firewall without losing a whole lot of coolant. I'll lose a little bit, but I won't be, dumping tons of it out. And I won't have this dripping all over the floor. All right? So I'm taking the intake manifold off. You shouldn't need to do that to do this job, but I'm resealing the upper intake anyway. So I'm going to pull this thing off now and give myself more room. But I wanted to point out that in order to take the thing out of there, you've got to remove this oil dipstick tube. And Dodge put one nice, easy to get to bolt right here. And then they put a less than convenient bolt way back here. Right there. So it's a little bit of a pain to get to. I'm going to try to use a long extension and a universal. But I just, so that you're not trying to yank on this thing. If you're following my tracks and taking the intake manifold off, there's this one crazy bolt back here you got to get to. It's a lot easier to see with the camera than it is to see with the naked eye. All right. But yeah, you can see I'm taking a lot more stuff out than most people would do to do this job. But I've got some other work I'm doing in this engine anyway, so I'm just going to take everything out before I pull the valve covers to give myself some more room. And it came out pretty as you please with a nice I guess that's about a 14-inch long extension and a universal. And worked just fine. Alright, so I got the intake manifold out of the way, and I thought I'd point out that you have this harness that's just laying over the valve cover and kind of will be in your way when you go to remove it. So instead of trying to tuck it down in the channel here, it seemed like it was just going to be a pain to get it around, and it was going to be in my way. I disconnected it from the computer and just carried the whole thing around the backside up and over the transmission dipstick tube and looped it down below. Oh, and I took in order to get this bolt off easily, you're going to need to take this off. So make sure you have a new gasket for the filler tube. Anyway, so that seems to work a lot better, getting it nice and easy out of the way, and hopefully we're not going to have to move that accumulator to get this valve cover out. I think we can sneak it past there. I don't really want to have to recover the refrigerant, but you know, if we do, we do. I have the equipment here to do that, but I don't think you do. We'll find out in a minute. All right, two little tips for you. One, now that we have the intake off, I went ahead and covered up the holes with some duct tape because we don't want any parts flying down those tubes. That would be bad, especially any that are non-metallic and you can't fish them out. The other tip was this valve cover is 17 years old. It's plastic and it is stuck. So instead of prying on that very brittle plastic, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some light taps with a old dead blow mallet. Just tap it. Don't go crazy with it. What we're trying to do is just break that bond from the, there we go. Look at that. We wanted that to break loose instead of trying to pry against that adhesion that had happened over all that time. So, and yes, you are going to come out. You even came out one-handed. Look at that. So, no, you do not have to take that accumulator out of there. All right. So now we have access to the right side to do our valve seals. Okay. All right. So we're going to pull the rockers out, and we're only going to do. What we're going to do is we're going to pull the ones out that are not sitting with any pressure on them. Let me explain. See this one? Let me get my hand out of the way there. See this one at the very back? You can see that cam load is pointing down and is putting pressure on the rocker. So we're not going to pull that one out just now. But the one right next to it has the cam load pointing up. So that means it's on the base circle and we can pop that rocker right out. Same thing here. This one right there, we could pop that one out. And this one, it's iffy. We'll probably wait on that one. So I wanted to show you, this is a cool little tip. I know a lot of guys use a bent wrench, but this old, cat's paw device, it's for using to pop retainers out of door panels and stuff. It just works perfect. Ta-da! So, just if you don't want to heat up a wrench and bend it, and you happen to have one of these, it's a little bit thicker. This is a Mac Tools. I think the part number is a UT4. Trust me, Mac Tools is not sponsoring me. They don't even warranty my tools for me, but hey, whatever. But it's working out good. Another quick tip. You don't want to put these back at a different spot. So as you're pulling them out, just grab yourself one of these organizer trays. I'm sure you have one laying around that had some type of hardware in it at some point. Empty it out. And this one happens to conveniently have 6 slots, so I can go just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I can just drop my parts right into the tray, and I know where they need to go when I'm done. All right, so got myself prepped and ready to go. I've blocked my spark plug tube holes. I've blocked my old drain back holes. There's 3 spots that they can drain back at. One there. Oop, my hand's in the way. 1, 2, 3 in the blue towels. And then I also put a couple of shop rags right here on the timing chain area. We want to do everything we can to prevent one of these valve keepers from going flying and going down into the gold pan, because if it does, you just added umpteen hours to your job. Okay. I don't leave. Some people say to have only one spark plug out at a time. I go ahead and leave them all out. It's easier to turn the engine when you're moving it to get to keep the rockers out. We don't have to worry about getting it out of time because the timing chain's staying attached. I'm not using the style of um, valve spring compressor that requires us to detach the timing chain. So if the engine moves, it moves. It's no big deal. I'm going to strategically do it to where it shouldn't, but if it does, it's not catastrophic for the engine to move while I'm doing this job. Um, like I said, all 6 are out right now, so you can easily turn this motor, and that's the way. So you can get the rockers out. You just take the ones that are easy to get. You roll the motor, take the rest of them out. All right, so that's that, and we'll get to work. So if you've done this job before on any type of vehicle, or if you've even just watched a video, before watching this one, to learn how to do valve springs, you know you're going to need a piece for a compression tester. If you don't have one, they do rent these at AutoZone. But I wanted you to note that you need to take that valve stem out. I have an extra one that I use just for this purpose. Whenever I need to just inject air into a cylinder, I have this one. But we're going to thread that down into a spark plug hole and use air pressure to keep the valve floating upwards. The air pressure is going to push the valve up while we have the spring detached. That's the whole purpose for that, is to keep that valve from dropping into the cylinder. Because if it does, well, that's a bad day. All right, so I'm going to roll that in there, put it in the cylinder that I'm working on, and I'm going to hook up shop air to it, and we need a minimum of 60 psi. I'm going to run it at about 80. And 80 psi, you need to have a decent compressor that can maintain 80 psi for however long it takes for you to get the work done on that particular cylinder. So, if you are super fast and you can get it done in 5 seconds, then maybe one of those little tiny, pancake style ones would work. I wouldn't recommend that. I would get something that at least has a 10 or 15 gallon tank on it, so it can maintain. I've got a 25 gallon tank one here, and that works well. Okay, so this is the tool I'm going to be using. It's made by Wind Tools. I think it's a copy of the Mopar one. R747-2. I don't know. I'll put the link in the description of the tool because I'm not exactly sure if that's the actual part number. But basically, it just loops underneath the camshaft and then sits on top of the valve spring. And then you put a 3/8 ratchet on it and you push down, and then you take a magnet and pull the keepers out. I'm not really sure how I'm going to film this because I've got too many things going on. But I do want to suggest, don't use a flex head ratchet. Use a nice long standard head ratchet. All right. Oop. Well, let me get this all set up and I'll show you. Okay, so I've kind of sort of got you guys positioned. Hopefully that's going to work with my craftiness. All right. Of course, my hand's going to be in the way. But basically, we're going to push this down like so, and see how the, well, maybe you can see it. I'm not sure. The keepers are already trying to come out. There they are, and come up with the spring. And you notice how it didn't fall in? That's because the air pressure is holding it up. And we can take that out of the way. And now our spring's out of the way. So from there, we put it in our tray so we don't lose the stuff. And we're going to get a pair of pliers and try to pop this up. Maybe I can do it with my fingers. Maybe. Nope, I have to come back with a pair of pliers. All right. This style of plier is a pretty handy thing to have. When they close, there's a little circle formed. It's pretty good for grabbing round things out, or pulling on wires and hoses and stuff like that. Come on, you can come out. It does not want to come. I might have to get a bigger pair. Alright, let me go find a bit larger pair. Okay, so I ended up using a pair of old beat up 90-degree angle pliers to get it off of there. That worked best for me this time. But I wanted to point out that when you get your new valve stem seals, here's your old one. There we go. There's your old one. Nasty. When you get your new one, in the box, at least for Victor Reins, they give you this little thing, which is nice, and it's a handy little sleeve, and you put it right over the valve so that you don't damage the new seal going over the sharp edges where the valve keepers are. Alright, so my hands were oily, so this is already kind of lubricated a little bit, so I'm not going to bother putting any more on it. And we'll just slide it right over. We got past the things just fine. Take our little thing off, because we're going to have to reuse that little sleeve for each, all 12 of our valves. But I thought that was nice of them to do that. You know, it's keeps things clean and unscarred. Alright, so here comes the fun part. We're going to compress it, and then we're going to put our thing on it. Push it down. Shaky, shaky, shaky. In she goes. Alright. Now I get my finger in there. Alright, there's the first one. Whew. Now we'll do the same thing for the next one. Alright. Let's rotate that around a little bit. Come on around. This is like the world's oldest screwdriver I just grabbed. Not even sure where it came from. Probably something I picked up along the way. Alright. Alright, down she goes. Fun stuff, I tell you. I get my finger in there. What you don't want to do is take the pressure off until you're pretty sure it's where it belongs, because you don't want to launch that keeper. There we go. Alright. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Let me pull this camera over here. And they're back in place. But you want to come up real gently after you've installed the second one, just to make sure that they're properly seated, so that you don't have one launch into the stratosphere, because that would be bad. Okay, so I was struggling with the back cylinders on this thing because it's just tough to get that tool in there. So I decided I'd put an extension on it, which of course, if you know anything about using a really long extension, you kind of have to have something over here holding the ratchet so everything stays at the correct angle. And that would mean you'd have to use two hands. So I came up with this. Basically, I took a long bolt that's the same thread pitch as the valve covers. I put a couple of little spacers there, and then this is like a washer with two holes. It's a steel washer with two holes. You could make one with just a piece of steel plate, you know, and drill some holes in it or whatever. And then I put an eye bolt on there, so it acts as a kind of a pivot point for my mechanism. And then from there, I realized I can actually apply tension with my knee. That not only gives me one hand free, it gives me two hands free. Check that out. Doot, 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 doot. So that's, you know, of course, I'm sitting in the engine bay. I had already removed the fan and fan shroud, and with my foot stuck into the balancer, I have just the right spot to go up and down, up and down, up and down. And man, did that save me. It really made things a lot easier. So it's just coming up with silly things like that is half the fun of being a mechanic. But, you know, I just figured I'd show that idea to you. I mean, you can just cobble something together. And then what I do is when I get done with this job, I'm going to take all those pieces and I'm going to throw them in a bag and I'm going to label them as what they're for. You know, pivot point for, you know, a ratchet off a valve cover, or I'll come up with something, you know, generic, so that I have that set up ready to go next time around. Because it probably took me, I don't know, a half an hour to cobble that together with some, you know, finding what I wanted to put it together with. And then, you know, that's going to save me some time when I go to do the back ones. So just, you know, I'm sorry to go on and on about it, but this is, you know, fun stuff. You know, if you have somebody with you, you probably could just have one person run the ratchet and the other person run the keepers and try not to trip over each other. But I'm here by myself, so I came up with a one-man hand there. Anyway, carry on, guys. All right, just show the same setup on the intake side. It wasn't as cool because I can't use my knee for the intake valves, but it still definitely got around the hole not being able to get directly on it because of the cowl. Using that offset and then the little tool midway down with a shorter extension, it did exactly what I wanted it to do. Made it to where I could just pop it down with one hand and take out the keepers and put them back in. All right, so that's you know, I'm pretty, you know, I'm pretty happy with that little mock, you know, that little setup there. Definitely a keeper. Well, it looks like that little setup is going to save me some time here too. I'm just able to get past the power brake booster with the little tool, and I should be able to get this thing apart back together. I'm actually concerned that I may not be able to release the tool when the spring is released. I may be in trouble. We'll see. It's gonna be tight. Once the keepers are released, that spring is going to be taller. I may have to finagle things to get it back in place. We'll see. Well, I ended up having to pull that brake booster. It's just not enough clearance once the spring was at full height. So I may be able to just grind the edge of that tool. I wasn't willing to try that right this second. It was easier just to, you know, it's 4 bolts, a clip, and 2 lines to pop that whole master and booster assembly out of there. It took me like 10 minutes, you know, so I just pulled it. I might modify that tool, maybe make it a little shorter, and if I decide I'm going to be doing this job again, we'll see.